You need winners? Let the Sports Advisor show you how to make money. General Manager Al DeMarco, a former sports reporter and contributor on Fox Sports, MSNBC, and Comcast Sports TV, brings over 25 years of handicapping experience to the table. Rick Torino, a 25-year handicapping expert, spent over a decade as a college and pro football editor at a national wire service. Together, they are the Sports Advisors, your number one source for winners.
Here we are, week number 10 of the college football season, which is quickly coming to a close. We've got 6 undefeated teams still left, and we're going to preview the games involving 4 of them, including that little SEC showdown between Georgia and Tennessee, between the hedges. I have one Al DeMarco here along with Rick Torino, and I've got to say, TCU and Tennessee and Georgia, Clemson, they're all having good seasons, but none as good as you, my dear friend. 8-0 with your Saturday best bets this season. Another one last Saturday cashing in, undefeated on the season. Hell, and I thought TCU was having a great season. But you cashed in last week with your dog shocker, top 25 dog shocker, Penn State getting the points against Ohio State. A game that really surprised me, especially with Penn State falling down early, coming back, playing well through the third quarter. But again, just too many points for Ohio State to cover, and you cashed once more.
You know, Al, watching that game, I'm thinking, boy, we're looking good. Once they went ahead, we were getting 15.5. I'm thinking, boy, we are looking good. And then that fourth quarter came, and you know what, Al? I walked away when Penn State fell apart on the last touchdown for the interception, and then at that point we weren't covering anymore, and I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. And then I come back, and I don't even know if I even saw the final of the end of the game live, and I looked on the phone, oh my God, 44-31, we covered again. So that made the Saturday. I don't care what else happened. That made the Saturday. And that was that. And you know, like we say, better be lucky than good sometimes.
Let me remind you 2 things that are very important. If you can't always catch us here on the video, you can always catch us on the podcast. We are available, as you know. You can listen to us on Spotify, on Apple, on Stitcher, on iHeartRadio. So you can always head over there and download us just in case you don't want to catch our pretty faces. I say that because my mom is probably watching religiously. So there you go. You can always catch us and download us. It's always available by Wednesdays afternoon. And make sure you subscribe down below so you can always be made aware of when our latest episode is going to be available, not only for the college football pregame show that Rick and I do, but also for the NFL kickoff to countdown show that Steve Budin and I do each and every Thursday. That is available. Again, that little subscribe button down there in the corner. Well, Rick, let's kick it off with a team that we have talked about each and every week this season, TCU. This time, the Horned Frogs at home, a 9.5-point favorite, taking on Texas Tech. And as I've said repeatedly over the past month, who would have guessed? Here we are, the latter stage of the season, early in November, and the team that's leading the Big 12 Conference, go figure, it's TCU.
Yeah, this is a team we've liked all season. I don't know. I guess it started that first week, and to be honest, you really liked them that first or second game against SMU. I know I remember taking SMU, but since then we have ridden the Horned Frogs to all these wins as they are 6-1-1 against the spread this year. Like we said, one of our favorite teams. They have won 6 of the last 8, just 4-4 against the spread against Texas Tech. But you know what? The way they played last week, so many weapons out TCU has. You know, they struggled a little West Virginia, but we have to love them on that 4th and 1 where they could have just ran the ball up by 3. They throw that nice deep pass to cover the spread, you know. So everybody had to be happy in Fort Worth and our subscribers as well. But, you know, I'm just not a fan of Texas Tech. 4-4. They have 3 quarterbacks. They got this redshirt freshman, B. Henry Morton, playing now. 11 of 33 last week, 152. They got beat bad at home from Baylor. They have trouble rushing the ball. 45-17, I think, at home. The only thing is, Al, why this game's throwing me off a little, that line is only 9.5. I mean, I don't know. You would think at TCU at home, it might be 14, 13.5. That 9.5 has me a little puzzled. I thought it would be a little more. I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, Al, but, you know, I'm not jumping off TCU's bandwagon this week because Tech isn't a very good team.
Yeah, I wish I had come to that conclusion about Texas Tech. prior to using the Red Raiders as my best bet last Saturday, because I got wrapped up into Texas Tech beating the hell out of West Virginia the prior week. And then last week, I figured, Patrick Mahomes was going to be there at the game because the Chiefs had the bye week. They were going to induct him into the Hall of Fame and the Ring of Honor. He was going to hang out with the team at halftime. And I thought, this, other than Buddy Holly being reincarnated, this was the game to jump on the Red Raiders. The only thing that jumped on the Red Raiders, and I watched the game, I don't know, because I guess I'm a glutton for punishment or a narcissist. I'm not sure. Maybe a combination of both. And what I saw was that Texas Tech, 30 carries, 148 yards. The Red Raiders rush defense could not get any containment on the edges. Reese just constantly pounded through. And when I look at TCU, I pointed out last week that this offense has become so much more diversified as the season has progressed. And I pointed out in last week's show that Kendra Miller, their running back, had gone over the 100-yard barrier in 4 of the previous 5 games. Well, now make it 5 out of 6, because last week he had 120 yards against West Virginia. On the season, he's now up to 851 yards, but more importantly, 6.4 yards per carry. So it's now a very much more diversified attack. To answer your question about where the line is, perhaps it's because people are worried that TCU might get caught looking ahead to next week's game in Austin against the Longhorns. But Texas Tech has showed me nothing. 5 interceptions among the quarterbacks that played last week. And you saw how 2 weeks ago Oklahoma State shredded their defense. You saw last week how Baylor did. The only team that didn't was West Virginia. I have no problem laying the points with TCU. And I'll say something else to you. I pointed out repeatedly when we've looked at TCU this season, TCU is a teaser darling as far as I'm concerned, because you have a situation here. I always like about teasers, taking a team that's laying anywhere between 6 and 10 points at home, especially. I'm now on a 2-team 7-point teaser, just saying, hey, TCU has to win by, in this case, let's say it eventually goes up to 10. I take them down. Just have to win by a field goal at home, and they're the superior team. Love them in a teaser as well.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Al, on that. And you know what? Duggan, watching that game, he really didn't even have a great game last week. I mean, his numbers were good, but I mean, he didn't rush the ball like he normally does. But they got 3 good wide receivers, the good running back you mentioned, the defense plays well. I think we're going to see them in Dallas for that Big 12 championship game. At least I hope we do. They're a great story this year.
Yeah, Sonny Dykes has really cultivated a new culture there. When you think of how this team had flailed around the last couple of years under Gary Patterson, and the guy that you always point out, Quentin Johnson, the wide receiver, up to 42 catches on the season, but over the last 4 games, 30 catches, 536 yards. Again, they can just beat you in so many ways. Next one on the board, they're not going to be any offensive fireworks, I don't think, in this game. We've got Purdue minus 4.5 points at home against Iowa. The Hawkeyes rebounded from that 54-10 loss in Columbus to the Buckeyes, a game in which they had 6 turnovers, all of them converted into points by Ohio State by beating Northwestern, a team that's now 1-7 on the season, 33-13 to snap a 3-game losing streak. And Rick, this is what I love the most about this game. After the game, Kirk Ferentz said it was his team's best offensive performance. I'm sorry, I can't even say this with a straight face. He said it was their best offensive performance. They had 398 yards. I mean, are you serious?
Well, Al, if they couldn't rack up some offensive numbers against Northwestern, then I don't know what to say. But that they've got to make changes at the end of the season on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to the play calling and everything. The big game for Purdue at home, a win this week, Al. And if Illinois defeats Michigan State next week or this week, then the 2-play, it's Purdue at Illinois next week. That game will go a long way in determining who's going to be the representative out of the Western Division of the Big Ten Ten in Indianapolis. Purdue, the couple of things, Alan, is first, visitor 7-5 straight up, 11-1 against the spread. The visitor is since 2008. Purdue has won 4 of the last 5, 4-1 against the spread, 2 straight wins, 3 straight covers. Purdue, a lot of offense, we know, number 1 passing, scoring offense in the Big Ten, led by a quarterback we've been on. We like Aiden O'Connor, 324 yards, 15 touchdowns. I don't know how Iowa is going to keep up with Purdue scoring-wise, but the only thing I can think of is there may be some revenge because Purdue is the one that knocked off Iowa last year in Iowa City after they had the big win against Penn State, and they may have been at that time ranked second or third in the country. So is Iowa, I'm sure they'll come in with revenge, but I don't know how much that matters to that dismal offense. That offense is just bad. And if, like we said, they couldn't blow out Northwestern now, then they should just shut it down for the year because that Northwestern team is bad.
Well, the only thing Iowa has going for it is its defense. One of the teams that has a great secondary. They can put a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. Aiden O'Connell, you're right. We have talked about him relentlessly this season, but do you get the good Aiden McConnell or do you get the guy who was intercepted 3 times against Wisconsin? He's thrown a pick in each of his last 5 games. A subplot here, Charlie Jones, who is O'Connell's roommate, and they transfer from Iowa where he had 21 receptions last year. And, of course, now with Purdue this year, 72 catches, 9 touchdowns. Perhaps the best wide receiver in all of the country in terms of a numerical perspective. And the other thing that in researching this game, it doesn't matter who the quarterback has been for the Boilermakers, but the last 5 games against Iowa, the Purdue quarterbacks, and again, it doesn't matter who the name is on the back of the jersey, they've averaged almost 310 yards, 14 touchdowns, and completed 65% of their passes. But that's the MO of the Boilers because they've always been able to throw the ball effectively. I'm with you. I mean, this is a key game. Illinois has that 1-game lead over Purdue in the standings, and it's not unheard of for Purdue at this stage to keep their – Iowa's just shown us nothing, as you said, offensively all season. So I'm certainly not going to, put any faith in the Hawkeyes at this stage of the game. The next game is very interesting because – as we record here on Tuesday night, I don't know who's going to be quarterbacking Kansas State. Kansas State just beat the hell out of Oklahoma State, 48-0 this past Saturday. And here's an interesting thing. Texas is a 2.5-point favorite. Only the 5th time since 1978, according to ESPN research, that an unranked team is favored to beat a top 15 team on the road. And here, in case you're on Jeopardy, this is going to be your answer. The last time one of those unranked teams pulled an upset when Sark was coaching USC back in 2014 and won 28-26 in Tucson against Arizona. Can it happen again?
Al, that was one of the most surprising outcomes of the scoreboard last week with Kansas State just shutting out Oklahoma State, 9th-ranked Oklahoma State, 48-0. The most lopsided win of Oklahoma State in 18 seasons under Gundy, and they were number 3 in the scoring in the country coming into that game. I'm going to like Kansas State at home, getting a couple of points. We're getting 2.5. They're in second place now. They hold on to that spot, Al. There are no divisions in the Big 12. It's the top 2 that'll play for the Big 12 title. I think Kansas State, the way they look, hey, if Martinez can't play, that's okay. The kid Howard, 21-37, 296, 4 touchdowns. The game will feature 2 of the better running backs with Bijan Robinson and Deuce Vaughn, both probably the 1-2 running backs in the Big 12. Texas 0-2 this year on the road. Just not a big fan of Quinn Ewers yet. We're looking at a Kansas State team that's been winning in Vegas, 6-2-1 against the spread, 5-1 at home this year, ATS. And keep in mind, 7-2. The under is 7-2 in the last 9 meetings in this series. I don't know how much the under might be this year, but it has been an under series the last few years.
And you've got a Texas team that's lost its last 5 true road games. Collapsed in the second half at Oklahoma State when they failed a couple of weeks ago before their bye. 1-6 in true road games since Sark came to Austin. 0-2 this year, losing in Lubbock in overtime, and again in Stillwater. Another interesting little sidebar to the quarterback situation with Kansas State. They don't want to burn the red shirt for Will Howard, a kid who had great numbers, as you pointed out last week. He's played in 2 games. You can play 4 games. So he could, in theory, play again this week. And, of course, Kansas State, like all teams and all coaches, they're keeping the injury situation close to the vest. And again, we're recording this on Tuesday night, so we have no idea whether it's going to be Adrian Martinez or Howard quarterbacking here. But I'm with you. I've got to go with Kansas State because Texas hasn't shown me anything on the road. And plus, let's not overlook the fact that we've got 2 very good running backs, perhaps the 2 best running backs. Well, yeah, I'll say the top 3 because I can't discount Miller out of TCU. But between Robinson for Texas and then you got Deuce Vaughn for Kansas State, who's already run for 902 yards a season, averaging 5.9 yards per carry, had 158 last week against Oklahoma State. So you've got a very interesting contest. The total sitting at 54.5. Interesting. I could see it going under where I think most people would anticipate it going over, but I would take the home dog in this situation because I just haven't been impressed with Texas anytime they're outside of Austin.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Al. With Kansas State 8-3 since 98 between 98 and 2014. Kansas 8-3. But since 2015 are just 1-6 straight up against Texas. So the series has kind of shifted toward the Longhorns. But, that I just can't. The home field with college just plays such a huge advantage. And the way they looked last week against Oklahoma State, I just think, I think they'll find a way. And plus, we're catching 2.5, though. So, we lose by a point. Oh, well, we got 2.5, so we're going to win the game. I think it can be that close of a game.
Yeah, and this is a situation where, in this case, if I'm on Kansas State, I'm buying up the half point. And any situation where I'm taking an underdog between 2.5 and 4, I'm always buying up the half point in this spot.
Yeah, you love the half point. You've been preaching it to our customers for years. I hope they're listening because it comes into play so much more than it doesn't come into play. That half point.
Listen, you look at the Sunday night game with the Buffalo Bills and the NFL. I'm a firm believer in you buying the half point when the line crosses 3, 4, 6, 7. I had this, bad feeling because Aaron Rodgers was the opposing quarterback, to be honest with you. And I thought, let me just buy the insurance for a couple of pennies on the dollar, taking the line from 110 up to I think it was 130. We're talking 20 cents. I'd have no problem betting a 130 favorite in baseball in the middle of July. So I went ahead and I took it, and that was what I recommended. It was my best bet on Sunday. Yeah, and I've, managed, and of course, when Josh Allen threw that costly interception down by the goal line when, I thought the Bills were going to get another score. And as you saw, the game finished right there on 10. But buying down to 10, walked away with a push. Some of the handicappers at the site didn't do it. They walked away with a loss. I just never have understood the philosophy. But again, it's like convincing a Democrat to vote Republican. It's just not going to happen. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make the dumb SOB drink sometimes. So there you go. No more preaching to the choir.
And Al, it's so easy now on the phone, on the wagering website, whatever one it might be, to just buy that half point down or 2 points or whatever you want to buy down. Back in the day when you and I were in it, there was no talking to the bookie on the phone and saying, "Can I buy it down a half point?" You got that line, and that line was solid. It was 3.5, and that's what you were getting. Unless you were teasing, there were no ifs, ands, and buts about it. But now it's relatively easy to adjust the line to your liking, as you've been saying over the years.
And again, just to let the people know, and we don't keep Danny, the former high school principal in the Philadelphia region. We had some former coworkers that were working in Atlanta, and on Saturday and Sunday mornings, we'd have our lines. We'd call them for their lines. And we'd go back and forth on which games we wanted to bet because that half point or 1 point difference because of the regional bookmakers, because nobody would let you buy a half point when there were local bookies like that. That's how we would get the half point or 1 point margins, by using regional bookies. And eventually we had some more coworkers that were out in LA. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, they're on a three-way call with us, and we're betting through three different cities through local bookmakers. And that's how we used to bet. Nowadays, you just pick up your phone and you go, buy the half point, do whatever you want. People don't understand this is the way it used to be. The show on Tuesday night, and they just announced the first college football playoff rankings, and we have Tennessee followed by Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson, and that's going to lead into our next preview where Clemson is taking on Notre Dame. But Rick, once again, we see how the pollsters always favor the big name schools. We see TCU, a team that's undefeated, leading a Big 12, which has been very competitive this season, getting screwed as usual. And it just shows something which I think that you're going to elaborate on, and I'll let you take it away because I'm in agreement with you 100%. But it just it's infuriating because the powers that be continue to just drag their feet through the mud.
Yes, what it is, AR, is they need to get to that 12-team playoff as soon as possible, because a team that's not going to make it this year most probably is going to be TCU, and they've played a good schedule, and they've looked great in their games, but of course undefeated, and they're in sixth, and guess who's in fifth? One loss, Alabama, still ahead of them, and you still have Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson. I can't believe they have Tennessee number one. I mean, just for the fact Tennessee deserves to be one, but the way this CFP is, it's surprising that they put them in, but I think there could have been outrage if they didn't make Tennessee. They have the best win of the year at home against Alabama. Their schedule, other than the UT Martin game, everyone from Pittsburgh to Florida, LSU, has been a good opponent. So they had to make Tennessee one. I'm sure Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson aren't happy because they feel they deserve to be that number one spot, being undefeated. But let's give the CFP a little credit that they did put Tennessee one. But it's a shame that a team like TCU is probably going to be left out of the playoffs this year. So it is what it is. It's just an issue that's got to get corrected somehow, and as soon as possible.
And the short-sightedness of this is that they don't realize that right now college football rules, and by expanding the playoffs, that you'd only have even more interest come the postseason. We have the plethora of bowl games that mean absolutely nothing. But when you attach those bowl games to playoff teams, suddenly those bowl games have some value. So we're not going to be watching the Military Bowl, the Fritos Bowl, the Arm and Hammer Bowl. I'm just inventing names. You and I could have a bowl if we came up with a couple $100,000 and paid for New Mexico State to play. That's the thing. These games would have some more significance, and people would watch them because suddenly you have number 8 playing number 9 or something like that. That works in college basketball. That's what makes it, they just can't get through their thin-skinned minds that this is what works, and use the same model in college basketball. Did it really hurt when they expanded the tournament? Each year when they kept moving and expanding the tournament. Hell, you even have play-in games with the little sister of the poor playing a Power 5 conference team, which gets good ratings. It will work in college football, but they just keep delaying the inevitable. But I agree with you. TCU is probably like this year's Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati comes from a far weaker conference, but never got the respect really until last year. And, and a one-loss team from a weaker conference, which the Big 12 is going to be perceived as a weaker conference, is never going to be eligible for making the Final Four, shall we say, than a team from the SEC, because you could lose 2. Right. You could have 2 losses and most likely get it. Right. And people will say, oh, yeah, but the Big 12 used to be that way. But the Big 12 is not as strong as it used to be. So anyway, that brings us to the Clemson Notre Dame game. I don't think Clemson is that good this year, but because I think they're the only top 25 or top ranked team that has 3 wins against top 25 ranked teams at the time. That's why they're so highly considered. The Irish are coming off a 41-24 win at Syracuse. We were right on the money last week when we said that the Orange were due for a big-time letdown after blowing the double-digit lead at Clemson the week prior, and you saw how they came out flat. And the Irish, an average team at best, dominated them in that win.
Yeah, this is an Irish team, average at best. The two teams last met in 2020 ACC title game. Clemson a 10.5-point favorite in that game. Notre Dame jumped out to a 3-0 lead. Before you knew it, 34 straight points for Clemson, 34-10. They went on to go on and win. Drew Pine, just an average quarterback for the Irish. 9 of 19 last week, 116 yards. Still a big fan of the tight end, Michael Mayer. 2 for 2 catches, 54 yards. Leads the team in receiving. We know what Clemson is. They have the top back in Will Shipley. I think, Al, I'm going to take the points in Notre Dame. I don't know. I think the ghosts of Notre Dame past are going to come up, and it's a Saturday night game in South Bend. Maybe Clemson squeaks it out, but if I can get the Irish at 4.5 at home, Clemson's quarterback situation a little shaky. We know Uyongale is going to be there, but how quick does he go to the freshman Klubek? I don't know. I just, not a strong one, but it wouldn't surprise me if Notre Dame covers this game or eventually pulls it out on just a typical game, one of the stunning upsets in South Bend that have happened over the years.
Well, the Irish have won 3 of their last 4, but then I look at who they've beaten. They beat BYU at the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, but BYU, as we've seen, is totally fallen apart. Beat UNLV. UNLV was playing 2 quarterbacks. One of them, they started a freshman as their regular starter was out. They beat Syracuse, but we pointed out why I think they beat the Orange. So I'm not really impressed with the Irish. I do like the way that Clemson's defense is rounded into shape. I like that they are giving Will Shipley the rock a lot more. Concerned like you are with the quarterback situation. At this price, awfully cheap, I lean toward Clemson. I also like the under here because I just don't see Notre Dame putting a lot of points on the board against this Clemson defense. I mean, this could be one of those boring 17-6 games, somewhere in the 20-10 range as well. So I can see Clemson in the under, and I lean more toward Clemson in this game. By the way, years ago, my wife and I were driving cross country. Well, she wasn't even my wife then. She was just my fiance, and we stopped in South Bend. We toured through the place. We saw Touchdown Jesus, the whole thing. My wife, who wasn't a big football fan at the time, she says, "Do you have to be Catholic to go here?" I said, "No, you just have to be a good football player." So we move on. Arkansas hosting Liberty. This is an interesting game, especially since the sidebar here, of course, Hugh Freeze just agreeing to the new contract extension with the Liberty Flames, but with Auburn finally making the ballsy move to get rid of Brian Harsin, something they should have done last year, and with the rumored move to be hiring the new AD from Mississippi State, it'll be interesting to see if wins are valued more in terms of past transgressions, and if Hugh Freeze might get his foot back in the door in the Plains. But you've got Arkansas coming off back-to-back road wins with a bye in between against BYU and Auburn. A 13.5-point favorite against Liberty. Who do you like in this one?
Well, Al, I agree with you with Hugh Freeze. Even though he got the contract extension, that still doesn't mean that Auburn can't come and hire him away. I think the 3 big names for Auburn, Hugh Freeze, one of them, Lane Kiffin, and I think Deion Sanders. I think, I think Hugh Freeze, he's got to be back in the SEC, and he's one coach that has had success against Nick Saban when he was at Ole Miss against Alabama. Tough matchup for Liberty, played well against Wake Forest in that 1-point loss when Wake was probably in the top 10. They've won 5 in a row. He does a great job. Liberty 0-2 straight up against the SEC. They are 15-7 against the spread as an away dog over the last 10 years. I just think that Liberty's going to have their hands full stopping that 2-headed monster of Arkansas's running attack between the quarterback KJ Stevenson and Raheem Sanders. 268 yards against Clemson on the ground. Sanders had 174. That's where I'm going to lean to. Arkansas is just going to be too big and pound that rock against the Liberty defense.
I agree with you 100%. I love KJ Jefferson coming off 234-yard passing performance against Auburn last week. And Raheem Rocket Sanders, 171 yards. He's over 1,000 now for the season, averaging 6.7 yards per carry. And the other thing is, I always talk about it in terms of step-up games. And I look at Liberty's schedule. Yes, they're 7-1, but they had the 37-36 loss to Wake Forest. They beat BYU, and BYU has just regressed terribly this season. But otherwise, they played Gardner-Webb, UMass, Old Dominion, Akron, UAB, and Southern Miss before Southern Miss caught fire. They played nobody. This is a trip to the SEC.
Right.
And
Yep.
just because Hugh Freeze has some SEC pedigree doesn't mean that it's going to guarantee for the Flames. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, and I think Arkansas is going to roll. And I look at that total at 63. I like that one to go over as well. So I'm riding Arkansas in this particular spot, and I like the Razorbacks. By the way, in terms of I read the same story. I think it was in The Athletic and a couple other places about the top three candidates. I think Primetime Dion is certainly a viable candidate, and I think Hugh Freeze is as well. But, Auburn has made such a series of mistakes in terms of hiring coaches.
What a disaster.
Brian Harsin was it was a stupid mistake. You bring a guy that has no experience in the South. He doesn't hire a bunch. He really didn't make the effort to connect with the Alabama high school coaches, which is just the antithesis of what Matt Rule did when he went to Baylor from Temple, where he immediately hired high school coaches on his staff and made the connections and that's what turned that program around. But if you're going to go, you got to swing for the fences. And if Lane Kiffin wants to take the boatload of bucks and go from Ole Miss and come back and compete with Nick Saban, who, again, is 71. You don't know how many more years he's going to be there. But that's the home run move you've got to make after the series of mistakes that you've made in the Plains. You got to swing for the fences, and I think Lane Kiffin is the only answer if he's willing to leave. Which, listen, Oxford's a great place. Ole Miss, a great turnaround story. He's been masterful with the portal. And just imagine if he can do that at Ole Miss, what could he do with the transfer portal? Because other than Lincoln Riley, nobody has done a better job with the portal than Lane Kiffin. Just imagine what he could do with the resources at Auburn.
Yeah. You touched right on it there, Al. The resources at Auburn are so much more than, say, at Ole Miss. Right now they're very dysfunctional. Would he want to get back into that? I don't know. The Lane Train's doing fine at Ole Miss. I think he would do well at Auburn, but they're just so, how much money you think about it, Al? They're paying a big buyout to Malzahn. They're paying a buyout now to Harsin. And right from the start, that was, like you mentioned, that was such a different hire, a bad hire, bringing someone from Boise State out west into the South, where, like you said, had no connections. Just they're supposed to be smart people, Al, but you wonder what they're thinking when they make these hires. Or is it even the AD that makes these hires, and it's all these boosters, Al? So much backstory to these hirings and firings that we'll never, ever get to the bottom of.
Yeah, and it's these screening committees. They go out and they pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to these screening committees that do all the backdoor impromptu introductions. They screen the candidates so the media doesn't find out. Then you get to the AD, they make the recommendations, and then the AD does the next shot. It's not like it used to be, especially when we were in the media. But you're right, the boosters have their hands in everything along the way, especially in the SEC schools. Let's face it, in the bigger programs.
Right.
That leads us to another SEC showdown Saturday night in Baton Rouge in Death Valley, the place where opponents' dreams come to die. And this is a very interesting game. Alabama coming off the bye, 13.5-point favorite against LSU. You used LSU as your big 100-dime play a couple of weeks ago when they absolutely destroyed the Lane Train, knocking Ole Miss from the ranks of undefeated. Jaden Daniels, you were high on him for that reason. You loved him, and he's had two monstrous games against Florida and Ole Miss. Do you grab the points here? Almost 2 touchdowns with the Tigers at home on Saturday night?
Yeah, I'm grabbing the points. I like the 13.5 at home. And we get them on a Saturday night. Another tough road contest for Bama. Both teams are off the bye. And like you mentioned about Jaden Daniels, his numbers the last 2 weeks, Al. Versus Florida, 23 of 32, 349, 3 touchdowns, rushed for 44 yards, scored another 3 touchdowns. And then against Ole Miss, 21 of 28, 248 and 2. And then rushed again 23 times, 122 yards and 3 touchdowns. He has just really turned the corner the last couple of weeks. I really like LSU grabbing the points. Is Alabama going to win? Yeah, they might win, but the 13.5 is a lot of points. They got another quarterback who's not on the level of Hendon Hooker, who they couldn't stop, but they got another dimensional quarterback that can run and throw and do a lot of things with his feet. LSU again has won some money at home this year, 4-1 against the spread. I'm gonna like LSU. They're 7-1 in their last 8 when getting more than 9 points. There you go. We're getting 13.5, almost 2 touchdowns. I don't think that line will move either way. But I got to take LSU at home. Kelly's got him turning the corner.
Yeah, I'm with you because you look at Jaden Daniels, that multi-dual threat type of quarterback, 6 touchdowns combined, 3 passing, 3 rushing in each of those games against Florida and Ole Miss. And you brought up what I was going to bring up because, again, guys, we talk about which games we want to discuss, but we never actually discuss the games until the camera goes on. And Hendon Hooker, I go to that comparison when they played Tennessee, Alabama playing Tennessee, 21 for 30, 385 yards, 5 touchdowns through the air, 14 carries, 56 yards rushing. There's no difference right now at the level of play between Jaden Daniels the past 2 games because he's healthy. He had to overcome ankle injury, I think it was, and also a back strain. Now that he's healthy, he has that LSU offense moving. It's not as potent as Tennessee, but this Alabama defense is not as good as it's been in past years. And it certainly was susceptible when it gave 52 points up on the road to Tennessee. Texas gave it all type of problems, remember, in week number 1, too. So grabbing 13.5 points, I'm with you. I don't think LSU can win, but I certainly do think the Tigers can stick around and cover, which, of course, guys, before we get to our big game, I don't know what Rick's big game will be for Saturday winner number 9 in a row, but you can get Rick's best bet and all the plays of all the handicappers over at thesportsadvisors.com for free by using the 1-day free all-access pass. It's normally $109 value on a Saturday, but you can get it for free. You get all the plays of all the handicappers. You get all their analysis, no strings attached, no obligation. The only way you lose is if you don't take advantage of this absolutely free offer. Check it out. It's the 1-day free all access pass. Guys, if you bought all the plays of all the individual handicappers, it would cost you well over $1,000. We've been doing it for over 22 years. We're the only people in the industry that make this available because we're not afraid to give you a taste of the action. If you don't want it for Saturday, you can get it for Sunday. The choice is yours. And some days, depending on the day you pick, you also get a bonus free day as well. So check it out over at thesportsadvisors.com. And Rick, that leads us to our final game, the battle of the unbeatens. Georgia, Tennessee, between the hedges, 8.5-point choice for the Bulldogs, who were coming off the win and in Jacksonville against Florida, failed to cover. But interesting, I've been on Tennessee every single game that we've talked about this year. Last week, I wasn't really in favor of Tennessee because I didn't really like the game because I thought against Kentucky it would be a game where they would perhaps get caught looking ahead to this week's game. Oh, I was wrong there because they just crushed Kentucky.
Well, I can't say I was any better. I certainly was on Kentucky last week. I heard some prognosticators actually pick a Kentucky outright win. Was totally against that. Did not ever think that was happen. But we thought that Kentucky would be able to move the ball a little on that Tennessee defense. Well, that Tennessee defense is really starting to come along. I mean, they held Will Levis. Now we're going to see we're going to see Al in April. All they're going to talk about is Will Levis, the quarterback from Kentucky, being a top 5 pick, and they'll never show any highlights against Tennessee that he threw for only 98 yards. So that's one of the things that's always one of my pet peeves. They only had 205 yards of total offense, and was in and had interception 3 times. So plus he was sacked 4 times. So the Tennessee defense really rose to the occasion last week. The offense, we know what they can do. You know, Al, a couple of weeks ago, this line when it came out, early line, was 13.5-point favorite. They were. At 8.5, would I have loved 13.5? Well, yeah, right now, but we know we're not getting that. But I'm going to take them out, getting 8.5. You know, that game last week, Florida, sometime in the third quarter, was only down 1 score to Georgia at 28-20. And really, Al, when you look at it, Georgia's first legitimate opponent since they faced Oregon in week 1. Since then, their combined record of their opponents, 22-26. And the key, Al, to this one is Georgia is going to be without their top linebacker, All-American Nolan Smith, who's out for the rest of the year with a pectoral injury. And he is like, Al, maybe better than that whole anyone on that defense from last year's team that he returned this year. So that's going to be a big void in that Georgia defense. So I'm going to, and this has been a series that's been dominated by Georgia over the years, but I don't know. Unless this line really drops because all the money, they're listening to us and they put all the money on Tennessee, I think I got to take Tennessee at 8.5, even 8, Al. I just think this could, a high-scoring game with Tennessee able to stay within the number and maybe even pull one out between the hedges.
Yeah, I'm with you too. I love Tennessee in this spot because the Georgia team, the defense, lost so much talent in last year's draft. It wasn't just I think they had 3 first-rounders, but it's also the mid-round picks that they lost to that on most other teams they would have been first-rounders in terms the equivalency in their talent. And now, as you said, they lost their best edge rusher, their top guy to get after a quarterback, which when you're going up against Hendon Hooker in the Tennessee offense, that's dangerous. And what I like about Tennessee this season, we have seen a team that has matured and gotten better as their confidence has grown. They are the team with momentum coming into this contest. As you pointed out, that effort that they had last week against Kentucky was their best effort defensively the entire season, especially in the secondary. A secondary in their pass defense, which consistently prior to that game had been at 131 FBS teams, had been pretty much in the bottom 5 all year. That impresses me. And if Georgia is going to beat you, Georgia is not going to kill you with their passing attack, kill you with their ground game. They have a balanced attack, but they don't have that explosiveness Tennessee has. So I think it's going to be, as you said, it could be a high-scoring back-and-forth game, but give me any points possible. I think, however, again, we're doing this Tuesday night. I think you're right. I think this line is going to come down because people are going to look here and go, Tennessee, I'm getting 8.5. This game's going to come down to 7.5 because I think people are going to look at the Vols being number 1 ranked in the college football playoff rankings, right? And then they're going to look at this and go, man, Tennessee beat Alabama. Tennessee's beating LSU. Tennessee's beating everybody. I'm going to get 8.5 points. I think the public's going to bet this one down. So if you're watching this early and you like Tennessee, don't wait. I always say if you
Good point, Al. Good point.
Yeah, because the dogs sometimes they don't bark as nicely when you're getting fewer points. So it's kind of a crazy thing sometimes. You bet the favorites early, you bet the dogs late.
And again, Al, hate to show our age, but 40 years ago or 30 years ago, you weren't able to do this. Put a Saturday bet in on a Tuesday and get that line. So, you take advantage of it.
Yeah, let's keep it at 30 years. Let's not go to 40 here, Rick. Okay, let's keep it here. Yeah, I mean,
I think it might be 40 though.
Okay, we'll re-examine that for next week's show. But anyway, guys, remember, make sure if you want to subscribe to the channel, do so. It's down there in the corner. And again, that way you can make sure you always are going to be aware of when Rick and I have our next show updated for you and for when the NFL show with Steve Budin is available. And remember, you can catch us on the podcast too if you want to download it and be entertained while you're driving to work. Who knows? But it's available on Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio, and Stitcher, and elsewhere. All the details are available online. And for Rick Torino, I'm Al DeMarco, and we will catch you next week. And make sure you check out over at thesportsadvisors.com for Rick's. Now, I'm going to put the jinx on you, but for Rick's 9th straight college football Saturday winner as he and TCU look to remain undefeated. There you go. Good luck, everybody.